Hi there, and a very warm welcome to this week's video. Now, this week is a little bit different as I'm going to ramble on for a bit. First of all, I seem to have a summer low, so the ideas are not streaming correctly through my brain. This is why I reached out on social media and asked you all to chime in and give me some ideas, and the answers were plentifully, so thanks a lot for all of them. Now, some of them are a little bit harder to do, so they need some time to implement. And therefore, what we are going to do today is look at some more simple thing. And this is how to do condensation droplets on beverages, for example. So something you see in commercials all the time. And we are going to utilize MoGraph and then, of course, render them with Octane. Now, on another topic, I'm going on vacation in 2 weeks. And this is the first time, I think, in 4 years. So this is a bit of a longer vacation. So don't expect any new content in the summertime. So basically, it's a summer break of the Silverwing channel. I'm just shouting this out here so you know what's going on. And now, without further ado, finally, let's grab your coffee and let's keep going. And welcome to Cinema 4D Land. You can easily see what we are going to do today. So we are making those droplets and droplets pattern. I have another camera that's more close up. This looks very nice and rather realistic. So let's just get started. Alright, I say that all the time, but this tutorial has the potential to be a true quick tip. So we start without the droplets, of course. But to have a little bit of an overview over the scene, let's familiarize with it. Let's go to the default camera and we can see that the soda can is standing on a backdrop. If we go back to our perspective, let's have a look at our lights. We have the environment, a spotlight, then a reflection light on the other side, as well as a top light. And they all make up this nice pretty render. Let's also have a look at one of the materials, which are very simplistic as well. So this is just a metallic material with GGX energy preserving and some roughness variation. But show don't tell, so let's go to the cyan material, which I named incorrectly. So let's call it cyan and then go to its nodes. So what we have here is just the color coming in from an RGB spectrum to the specular, as well as the variance coming in from a texture. And if we look at that, this is mapped around the object using UVs. Since the variance in roughness would be too high just using the texture, we are remapping that with a gradient. You could also use a range node for that. And this is all there's to that for now, so let's actually start with the droplets, which to no one's surprise starts with creating a cloner. Let's put the cloner into the right position and then set it up. Of course, we want the droplets to sit on our object, so we need to set it to object mode. And since there are a lot of droplets later on, let's go with the most efficient mode, multi-instances. As an object for our cloner, let's select the middle can because it has the most surface area and therefore shows the best what we do with our droplets. Now, let's actually produce a droplet by creating a sphere. I changed the default for the creation to be a hexahedron. If we go and B to show the mesh, I think this kind of mesh is a little bit more clean than the standard sphere here. And A to go back to ground shading, and let's actually set the size of the sphere to 1.75 millimeters and then get it as a height of the cloner. Here we go. Now, the sphere is doing what spheres are usually doing, being round. But droplets are usually a little bit more squished. So what I want to do is go into the coordinates here and set the SZ coordinate to 0.75. Nothing has changed, and this is because it's prohibited by the cloner. So in the cloner's attributes, what we have to do is go to object and then reset coordinates and untick that. And now we can see we have some slightly squished droplets. Next, real quick, let's generate a material for our droplet by going to Material, Specular Material. What you need to make sure here is that the transmission is set to 1 and the index is set to 1.33, which is the usual case for liquids. Let's call it exactly that and then assign it to the sphere. Here we go. The next steps I'm going to show might seem a little bit excessive, but I promise you it all makes sense in the end. So what I'm going to do is go to the cloner and set its count from 20 to a whopping 20,000. Now let's stop the rendering. Since we don't want to see this mess here, let's concentrate on the viewport. What I want to do is randomize the size a little bit so you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to the effectors and create a plane effector. Not what you expected, right? In the plane effectors parameter attributes, what I'm going to do is disable the position and enable scale. And inside of the scale also tick uniform scale as well as absolute scale. And then as for the scale value, I'm going with a minus 0.85. This makes the droplets the smallest they will ever be. And you might be asking, where's the randomness? Sorry, I lied a bit. This is no true randomness. So what we're going to do is utilize fields and there a shader field in which we're going to load a Cinema 4D noise like this. The reason I opted for a noise is because it has a lot of settings that we can use to later exactly define the look of our droplets. For our purpose here, I already know the values, so we are going with a global size of 75. Then scroll down here and put the low clip to 25 and the high clip to 50, which gives us this particular look here. If we unpause the render and look at our mean result, we still have a lot of overlapping droplets here that we don't want, so we need to do something against that. And this something is the push apart effector. So if we go to MoGraph, then push apart, you can see that it takes a while because the push apart has to do quite a bit of thinking. And then all the droplets are gone. And this is because if I go to the effector here, they are pushed apart 100 millimeters from each other, which is much too far. So what we want to actually do is get the same distance as the sphere in here, so 1.75, and then we can see hopefully that they return to the canvas. Here we go. This gets us closer, but we are not quite there yet, as this looks more like Alien X than droplets. So if we take a closer look, you can see some of the droplets are hovering above the surface. And this is the case because they don't have any space to sit on the surface without intersections. What we can do instead of pushing them apart is to hide those which are in the way. A word of caution here, the push apart effector has to think quite a bit with this many clones. So it takes a bit of time, but when we are there, we are greeted with the almost final result of the droplets being formed. So what we are doing here is essentially some circle packing or dart throwing. Basically, we are creating a lot of potential droplets, but then culling away those that are intersecting, leaving the space for only those that can fit in there. Now, as we still have a little bit of time, let's add some additions in here, because sometimes you don't want the droplets to go somewhere, for example, the upper and the lower rim. Let's turn off the rendering and the push apart for now, as we want to have a little bit of a faster handling. Let's select the cloner and go with a plane effector once more. Let's call the plane effector plane cutoff and then go inside of it into the parameters and deselect the position. The only tick we need to give here is the visibility. Next, we're going to use the fields again and actually create a linear field here, and you can already see what's happening. If the value is under 50%, the clones are going to be invisible. Next, let's change the length of the field to 5 mm as well as its axis to -y, so we can drag it up exactly so they don't reach the upper rim, like this. Rename the field to A, duplicate it and name the new one B. Then go inside of the cutoff and drag the field in the fields list underneath the A field. Set field A to multiply and then go to field B, reverse its axis to +y, and then what we can do is drag it down to exactly the position we need. Something like this. Last but not least, let's go to the cloner and its effectors and set the cutoff operation to be the first operation in line. Let's sort the effectors in the object manager the same way and then pull it down underneath the cloner like this. And of course, last but not least, turn back on the push apart and wait for it to process. Here we go. To also get the droplets to the other parts of the can, it's very easy. We need to duplicate our cloner. In order to not wait for compute, let's turn off the push apart again. Let's duplicate our cloner and then just select, for example, the can top here. And of course, we are not seeing anything because the cutoff that we just established is also active for the new cloner. So what we need to do is go to its effectors and then just turn it off there. Also, the area this is cloning to is much smaller, so what we can do is go to the object and then just change the count to, for example, 5000. To bring this home, let's duplicate the cloner 2 more times, then go to the second cloner and select the clip. I seem to be not able to do so, so let's disable all the cloners and try again. Nice, this works. And for the third cloner, select the pin, or nipple as I called it. And also for the last 2 cloners, set the count to 500 actually. So let's turn on all the cloners again and also the push apart. And then once it's ready, let's go to a close-up. Here we go. And the last action before we move on to our bonus section is to get rid of those unnatural looking droplets on the rim here. Other than fields, what we also can do is get a selection going on some objects to restrict the cloner to a certain area basically. So what we need to do is select the connected cloner and then just drag in the selection to the selection field. Here we go. This is now looking much more natural. So let's finally hit render and then marvel at our result. Looking pretty convincing, I think. And welcome to this chapter. I think it's appropriate to call it troubleshooting, as with the droplets there can be some things that are troublesome. First of all, in the meantime, I think it's very well known, but I want to mention it here anyway. So if you have trouble with your render times, if they're too long, if the render is too noisy, what you always can do is go to your droplets material, go to the common tab and turn on fake shadows. This will make the droplets look a little less realistic, but the render time a lot faster. This next one is a very common effect, so the boundary condition between the water and the metal produces a much too dark reflection other than what would be anticipated in a realistic scenario. This is actually an error of how nested dielectrics are handled and can be turned off when turning off the nested dielectrics altogether. Of course, this will turn off the nested dielectrics globally, also on parts of the scene where you might need them. So this is not the best way to deal with it. To get this working with nested dielectrics still enabled, what you need to do is search for your metal materials, go to its basic tab and make sure they are not running on some sort of legacy mode. This also fixes the thing. Small droplets like this need a very high accuracy when path tracing, so you need to set your ray epsilon accordingly. If we lower the precision here, you might end up with horrendous looking droplets. The rule of thumb for smaller scene sizes like this is to always go with 4 leading zeros before the 1. Here we go. Welcome to our small but hopefully delicious bonus where we try to increase the realism of the scene even more. What I want to go for is a more connected look between the droplet and the metal surface, and actually there's an effect that can help us do this, and this is the rounded corner. So let's go to the liquid material, to basic, scroll down here and just enable rounded edges, then go to the rounded edges, create the shader, then go in here, create a radius of 0.5, go and select the accurate mode, then go with the maximum of samples, which is 16. Now this will only consider the same object, the droplet itself, not the metal surface, unless we tick consider others. The effect isn't huge, but it helps to connect those objects a little bit better and make them look more natural still. And this is actually it. A short and snappy one, maybe a little bit longer than anticipated, but still short and snappy, I would say. So thank you very much for sitting through this. I hope you learned something. Let's thank those people who made this video possible. As always, my Patreons. Especially my €50 tier subscribers, Shields Augustinen and Leon Studio TV. Also, of course, a huge thank you for my €15 tier subscribers, Doyim, For Die Thieves, Adam Sen, Alessio De Vecchi, Ami Sheetreed, BVR, Christian Grajewski, Gabriel Machado, Graham Bucknell, Gregoris Morikis, Joel Muckemer, John Edward, Chris Clemson, Mahmoud Morsi, Ness Graphics, Nico Straub, Part 1 of 2, Ralph, Raiko, Shamus Johnson, Shiro 2049, Zoo Shag, Terry Wayne Ranson, Jan Verbeeke, and Yassin Rupp. And welcome to the after show party. Let's make this short and snappy as the video itself. Thank you for my Patreons, because I asked for some ideas and some of the Patreons jumped in with the ideas of the condensation droplets. Today I also am quite satisfied with the output. Hopefully you are too. As I said, I will make this short today, so if you want to help me against the algorithm overlords, let's post a droplet in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching this and listening, especially to the end section here. Special shout out to everyone still around. And I say a great day to you, a fantastic time ahead, and happy condensing. Bye.